Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you. It's a privilege to have all of you join us for the third session for today under the Global Economic Ideas Festival, which is a annual global conference put together by the ICC, the Institute of Certified Chartered Economists, in partnership with the Young Global Economist Society. We started earlier today. We already had a couple of sessions, and we are very excited to head into the third session for today, which is going to be very interesting, looking at the kind of topic we're going to discuss, and obviously the lineup of speakers that we have to delve deeper into the conversation. And briefly about the ICC is it's a globally recognized professional body that is providing certification in economics. So if you are here and you are already an economist or you're aspiring to become an economist, irrespective of the level that you are in your career, obviously you can be a part of the ICC. And the course of conversation, I'll put a website link there. I'll also share my email address, so in case you want to reach out to know more about the ICC, I'm more than happy to share the details with you. For the GEIF, it forms part of the ICC's global strategy of trying to create platform to bring people together to have conversation, because we know as economists, we have to be part of the conversation that drives our global economy. And that is why we started GEIF. Last year, we had the first edition, and this year we're holding the second edition virtually. We're hoping that next year will be something that we can do in person, and hopefully we can get a chance to meet all of you at GEIF 2024. As I said earlier, we already had some previous discussions, and we are heading to the next session, which is about Africa, India, and China. So we're delving deeper into what it means in terms of Africa's development agenda and the role being played by some key partners. In this case, we're going to be looking at India and China, but of course also the global context, or the partners that Africa have been dealing with in recent times, of course, and how we are changing our development journey. So to help us do that, of course, I have some gallant gentlemen to do that, but I have a moderator in the person of Boris Lagu, who is my colleague at the ICCE. So Boris is the global head of partnership at the ICC. So I've been working with him for the past years, driving the ICC to the level that we see it today. So Boris, I'll hand over to you. Maybe you can give the house rules on what's going to happen in the next sessions. And then, of course, hopefully we can have a very insightful discussion as our space is going to be. So thank you very much, gentlemen, and I'll hand over to Boris now.
Thank you, Paul, for the introduction. And I welcome you all for this session. Very exciting. Africa, India, and China. I think, that's the buzzword. All the three big powers, a lot of potential. So looking forward, to have a very interesting conversations with all three of you stalwarts in the respective fields. As we all know, Africa has great economic potential. It's attracted a lot of interest and investments in recent years from the two big players, which is obviously China and India. We have a lot of abundant resources. The population is very young. The middle class is growing. It is aspirational in Africa. So obviously it has led to a lot of increase in the engagements with the global giants. In fact, China has even surpassed, traditional partners like Britain, US, and France. So now Africa is, one of the largest trading partner of China. However, I'm sure you gentlemen will appreciate that despite the vast opportunities, these kind of partnerships bring a lot of challenges with them, like, for instance, debt sustainability, environmental concerns, potential negative impacts on the local communities also should be addressed. I'm sure African nations will find a way, or are navigating through these challenges by, fostering balanced relationships and promoting economic growth, a balanced economic growth without compromising either on the sovereignty or the natural resources, the abundance that they have. Considering these, challenges, that and the opportunities that we have. Collaboration with China and India is extremely crucial for Africa's journey going forward for a shared prosperity time. So the synergy is very important between the Africa's potential, China's economic prowess, and obviously the India's innovation that provides a very unique opportunity for development that should be sustainable. So what concretely needs to happen to ensure all these three partners in the ecosystem benefit, particularly the its people and the continents as such. So if I could ask maybe Dr. Evans first, then Mr. Shanta, and then Mr. Zay, that I mean, from your extensive experience, what do you think should be kind of the strategy looking forward for Africa as far as these two economic powerhouse is concerned? Dr. Evans.
Okay, thank you so much. Is it very clear, Garish? Is it very clear? Can you hear me?
Yes, it's clear. Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. So currently, when we look at what is happening in Africa, and because I'm in Ghana, I would want to start with what is happening in Ghana. So you look at Africa in particular, everything related to China and India, there's been a long relationship between the two of us. So currently, Ghana's biggest trade in terms of trade has been with China. So our biggest partner is actually China in terms of trade. And a lot of imports are happening between importation and exports happening between Ghana and then the Chinese government. As of the last report that I checked with the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, we have over 261 Chinese firms that are actually registered in 8 sectors in the Ghanaian economy. And majority of these ones are owned by Chinese shareholders. It means that there's quite a lot of exchange happening between China and also happening between China and Ghana. Now, looking at India, India has also been having a lot of relationship with China. Currently, there's about 3 million Indians living in about almost 40 countries in Africa. So Indians have been focusing more on commodities, and commodities, we're talking about cocoa, cashew, and a whole lot of stuff. And now there's technology that India is doing so much with Africa in terms of technological digitalization and so on and so forth. Now, with my experience over the period, what I've realized is that everything related to both sides would have to do with alignment of policies and alignment of interest. What it means is that the Africans would have to check our interest and align them to that of the Chinese and that of the Indians. In other words, if you pick the Belt and Road Initiative, which I'm sure we'll be talking about very soon, would have to look at the interest of Africa, specifically for someone like me, like Ghana, and how do we align to that? We'd have to look at other ways of having innovative and creative financing methods that will be able to help with the win-win that China is proposing at this moment with the BRI, so that we'll be able to see how best it goes. So just for the start, what I'll just say is that there's an existing relationship that exists between Ghana, China, and India. Africa has that relationship already with China and with India. Ghana in particular has its biggest, or I'll say the largest trading partner being China. So in this case, there's already an existing relationship. How do we move from just trading into having a win-win where interest and policy are being aligned? And I think that's where we'll be able to make the difference.
Boris, you are muted.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Mr. Shanta, your views on this, how India can, really get a positive balance of trade or be, I won't say equivalent to China, but have its own with the IT and the innovation and the technological advancement that is happening in India. We would like to know your views.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This is an honor to be here in this forum, and I've admired the work that the Young Economist Group has been doing for a long time. So it's really a pleasure to have a chance to engage with them. I'm going to talk about both China and India. By the way, I'm not Indian, in case people make that mistake. I'm from Sri Lanka, so, and I'm more of an African than either of those, having worked on Africa now for about 40 years. And you know, just like the previous speaker, Evan was saying, there's no question that China and India are important trading partners to Africa and important financing partners or investment partners to Africa. That just makes perfect sense, just because Africa is part of the global economy. And in that sense, you should trade with whoever you can get the best advantages with, and you should invest, and you should have foreign investment from whoever can make the most productive investment. And as you know, the trade relations, particularly with China, have been growing very rapidly over the last 20, 30 years. At the same time, and so has the investments, large Chinese infrastructure projects, some of which are part of the Belt and Road Initiative, are all over the continent. At the same time, there are serious problems with those investments. And sometimes with the trade relations. I mean, we know that many countries that received high investments from China, like Ethiopia, Zambia, are in serious debt distress. And by the way, I would add Ghana into that list too. Ghana is beyond debt distress. They're actually in debt crisis, just like my country, just like Sri Lanka. So I'm familiar with that. So we have to ask the question, how can we manage this relationship better? And I would just point out 2 or 3 things which go back to what was the problem in the first place. I think one of the biggest problems, you know, many of these investments, like the Zambian electric utility, was a major investment in Zambia, were made without much reference to the underlying policy framework for electricity in Zambia. So you actually had a situation where electricity was highly subsidized, and then you built an electric utility so that the subsidy actually increased rather than decreased. And as a result, you've got a electric utility that is practically bankrupt at the moment. And that's where the debt crisis came. And this is a really important point. And, you know, I might be a little biased because I think it's almost the inverse of the way the World Bank operates in Africa. And people quite rightly criticize that as well, where the World Bank says, well, before you do an investment, let's see if we can do some improvements in the policy framework. Let's see if we can reduce the subsidy so that then the new investment will be productive. And this was, you know, part of the tension between, say, the World Bank approach and the Chinese approach, because the Chinese were very, very transparent, very open about it, that they don't insist on policy changes. They don't, and they in fact criticize the World Bank, criticize me sometimes about the fact that we try to intervene on the policy front. But you can see why this has created a problem, because if you don't do anything about the policy framework and you simply build an electric utility, you may not be helping the country. That actually is hurting the situation, and we're seeing these debt crises now in several countries. And it's the same thing as Evan said earlier about or maybe you said about the environmental problems as well. You know, the one reason people criticize the World Bank is that they're very slow, but the reason they're very slow is that they try to make sure that there are environmental safeguards, social safeguards to their projects, which take a long time to actually resolve. And these same safeguards aren't necessarily maintained in some of the other investments. So I think we can make improvements by learning from each other, from these two ways of doing business. Doesn't mean we have to go to one extreme or the other. That is either only policy improvements and no investment, or only investment and no policy improvements. I think there is a middle ground, but I'd like to see both sides come closer to that middle ground. Let me just say one final thing about India, because the scale of Indian investments is much smaller, and the trade as well. But there are two aspects to India that I think can be extraordinarily valuable to Africa. One is, and you didn't mention this, the Indian diaspora. You know, East Africa has a large number of people of Indian origin, some of whom have been there for hundreds of years. But they do have links, especially the Gujaratis have links with their native land. And I think, given that there are sectors in India that are doing extraordinarily well, there is a possibility of technology transfer from to their brethren, if you like, in East Africa, and that's an added advantage, more over and above just a normal trading relationship. And this came to me because when I was the chief economist for South Asia, a group of the Amul Dairy, which is this very successful dairy cooperative in Gujarat, came to see me and said, you know, we have relatives in East Africa, in Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda. We would like to take the Amul model and see if we can work in East Africa. And they, you know, they basically said, you know, we'll pay for it and everything else. We just want you to help us make the connection. And we did. And that has worked out really well. And you actually have a fairly successful dairy cooperative now in Tanzania and in Uganda, thriving. The final thing about India is about the regulation of the internet, or regulation of the IT industry. You know, the African governments are grappling with it. How do you regulate these large monopolies like Google and Amazon and so on? And frankly, the models we have are the two extremes. We have the European model, which is very tightly regulated, and we have the American model, which is not at all regulated, as far as I can tell. And I don't think either of these is actually suitable for low-income African countries, because they don't have the capacity to do the heavy regulation. And I don't think you want to let Google and Amazon run loose all over Africa. I think India offers a possible solution, because India is an intermediate case where they have some regulation, but not excessive, but it's not zero either. And so I think India could serve as a model for African governments that are looking for guidance on how to regulate the IT industry.
Thank you. I think you have given quite a balanced view, not only with regard to the investment should happen, or some policy changes, or I would say policy amendments, but also an interesting perspective on technology transfer, particularly with India being the catalyst, if I can use that word, and, you know, helping setting a base, or, you know, replicating that model. Well, I'm curious to get to know the Chinese perspective. So if I can come to you, sir, and what do you think? Because Africa is one of the largest trading partner of China. So what would be your view? We would like to understand about either the investments or how the policies should happen, because China is massively investing in Africa. We would like to know your views, please. You're on mute, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just pushed the wrong button. Yes. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. First, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be in this panel discussion. I feel very greatly honored to be with all the other speakers and also the moderator yourself. Well, I think the discussion started with very interesting some argument points, I'd say, about the policies and actual projects. And also it brings in difference between the World Bank and China. Well, this is a very interesting subject. It takes a while. I think it could be, if we can, there could be let's say a Nobel Prize win, the Nobel Prize subject, if we can really someone can have a deep study on the developmental approach of the World Bank and China. I myself worked in the World Bank and for some years as the alternate senior advisor and alternate director of in the Chinese ED's office, the Chinese executive director's office for twice, about plus altogether for about 6 or 7 years working in the World Bank. I just give you well, I don't want to take too much of a time. This is could be a long story. And during that time, the World Bank, of course, provide a lot of, we call it policy adjustment loans. Okay, they provide to all the many countries, but they're dealing with policies. But what I can tell you now here, China has never borrowed a single loan, but so-called structure adjustment loans from World Bank. The policy loans, that is the budget-based approach, budget-based loan. The World Bank gives you 500 million or even 1 billion US dollars just for your budget. Okay, because many of the governments, they are in deep trouble. They have to borrow money to fill up the gap of the deficit. But China never borrows that kind of loan. China borrows, the loan is what you call it, it's project-based, it's contract-based loan, not policy-based. So we do project. One project, a large proportion of the projects for infrastructure. So we do infrastructure projects where others doing some other things, but we build roads, ports, railways, highways, everything you name it, waterways, inland waterways and ports, billions of dollars were used in infrastructure development, as well as, of course, agriculture and poverty alleviation projects. That is also very important. Health and education. Okay, wow. Then there was, I think, Sangta talking about what the China's project cooperation with Africa. Well, when the Chinese are dealing with doing the project, but not the policies. Well, I frankly speaking, I know not very much about the Chinese policy involvement in Africa, but what we know, our policy is non-interference. We are not going to interfere with the African countries, their internal political affairs. Okay, that's their decision to make any kind of plan or development strategy or policy issue, and so on. That's up to the African people to decide what kind of approach they'll take. We're not going to teach them. You know, as a teacher, as a senior advisor, senior consultants, we send people as technicians, not advisors, policy advisors, but engineers, technicians to all kinds of infrastructure projects or agriculture projects. But that does not mean that Chinese don't pay attention to the policy issues. On the other front, on the contrary, Chinese are the people, in my opinion, they are very much dealing with the policy. They are famous like 5-year plan. Although we have now how many? That's 15th or 16th 5-year plans. So before we start any project, we do a plan. We have a policy strategy. We have a poverty alleviation strategy. We have a transportation infrastructure development strategy. Everything we have a strategy. Of course, I think the BRI. We talk about the BRI. I think the policy dialogue is also a very important component. People-to-people contact, people-to-people exchange. We also do policy exchanges, ideas, what kind of development approach we maybe is best suitable for the country, for the people. Of course, according based on the specific country circumstances. But again, as I said, we're not going to teach them. We're not the teachers. We're not, So that in that sense, maybe we mainly focus on the development infrastructure. But of course, for the concerns about the Chinese, there's a lot of claim that the Chinese the investment in Africa cause a lot of problems like a debt sustainability issue and environmental concerns and the participation of the communities and so on and so forth. But I think that any kind of judgment or conclusion from that kind of cooperation, I think we should hear what the African people say. It is the African people, they know very well what they're doing. They know very well how they can work with the Chinese to achieve their objectives. So because of the time constraint, I cannot speak too much more on this. But what I would like to say, China, I don't think China has caused any debt problem has been caused by China. If you take a look at the very brief history of China's cooperation with African countries, at that time, we call it is the cooperation or the assistance, if we call it, from China to African countries. We call it, it's the it is the poor helps the poor. So China's assistance program in African, we got it, the poor helps the poor. It's not the rich helps the poor. That's first. We also treat each other as equal partners. Okay, China has never forced African country, innocent country, to pay the loans. China has never done that, to force others to pay back, to repay the loans, because the poor help the poor. How can a poor people force other poor to pay back their loan? Okay. And there are also many others. I'm not going to list this, but what I have to say, we also we have not caused that problem. In fact, let's hear what we remember last time the president of Kenya said. In fact, the debt, all the largest creditors are not China for them, but other countries. So there are many other countries plus together. They are much more. The debt the African countries borrow much more from China. So sometimes it's not true that China is the cause the debt problem. We understand. We also participate in the past. China is the very strong supporter for the debt relief of African countries and other countries. Even recently, I think China participates in the negotiation with they have a bilateral discussion. Even the finance ministers from certain countries that visit China will discuss about this. But China has never forced ask other country, okay, you have to pay back the loan. No, that's not the Chinese way to work with African countries. While for environmental concerns, we have also higher standard in China. Our environmental standards, we call it safeguard policies, is no less than World Bank. Even so, the World Bank, so China uses its own national system for their project, for environmental assessment of their project, supported by the World Bank. So we have very strict environmental protection rules now in China. And also because our philosophy is, if something you do not want to do, you cannot ask other people to do, because you yourself don't want to do it. You can ask other people to do it. So we also now are paying more and more attention to the environmental concerns of any project. We call it now the BRI project. We have more. We call it develop the green infrastructure development, low carbon infrastructure development. Now it is I think the future approach for BRI to in infrastructure sector, green and low carbon will be the top priority for the cooperation. And I think I'll just stop here for maybe I talk too much. I'll stop here for a moment. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. I think very interesting. I can bounce this question to Dr. Evans just to understand on what he has to say. With this China perspective, and because huge contribution by China, be it investments, be it other stuff into Africa. So how sustainably can this trade and investment go forward?
Thank you so much, Garish.
Okay, please.
No, Jinjiang, please proceed.
Please.
No, go ahead. No, I thought your question was the question is for you for the moment, right? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Evans.
You ask me or you ask?
No, I'm asking Dr. Evans.
Evans, huh?
Yes.
So Evans, perhaps you go ahead first.
I think you're on mute.
No.
Can you hear me? I think I lost you for a sec.
No, I'm not on mute. No. I mean, so your question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes, continue. Dr. Evans, continue.
Okay. So you want to hear about the future cooperation, right? Your question is about the future cooperation.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The question is
yes.
Yes. The question is to Dr. Evans, based on what you said about China's investment and policies. I wanted his perspective as well, so that we have a balanced view.
Okay. So, okay. Let's first have here.
Yes, and then you can counter as well later.
Oh, okay. Well, no, Dr. Evans, please.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Garish, and thank you so much, Janjan. I think I like where Shanta started the whole conversation from, and the most important thing is that we are looking at policy on one side, and we are looking at the local interest on the other side. So if you pick Africa in particular, the most important thing that Africa is looking for, before even we talk about policy, is the interest of Africa. What is the interest of Africa? Currently, like Shanta mentioned, we are highly geared in terms of debt. We are in the red now, things a bit tough on that side. So Africa is looking more towards anything that is related to productivity that can liberate Africa from that dependence on the foreign aids and help and everything. So what then helps? Because if you look at the BRI, it used to be one belt, one road kind of, which in Ghana, we were trying to emulate something like that called the one district, one factory, where the intention was to be able to bring more productivity to every district in Ghana. The more productive we become, the less we would have any dependence, but probably on any of these foreign aid and everything. Now, China as a major trading partner is actually being of great help to Africa and to Ghana specifically. But what Ghana and Africa would need is that the policies of China should always align to the interest of Africans. And like Jinjin mentioned, Chinese are not interested in coming to teach us and to come up with the concept that, we're going to be consultants too, we're going to be this. That is a great position. And that's what I like about Chinese approach towards Africa. I really love that. It means that we are autonomous. They are not coming as the big brothers coming to impose ideas on us. It's a contract-based something. But the problem that we're having in Africa is that we have a major problem. And I would want to reiterate this point because we are having problem with what we call institutional fitness. There's a lot of corruption going on in Africa. There's a lot of looting going on in Africa. We are having a lot of these problems that policy is the only way to solve it. So for me, I think that China would have to balance a bit of the approach, with also looking into the policies which would align with the interest of Africans. So in a nutshell, China trade partner for Africa, because China has always been focused, and now they are in Ghana, they are biggest or largest. So as a matter of fact, China also needs Ghana and Africa. But what we would have to do now is to make it clear that China would have and aligning their policy to it. And that's the part I want to hit right on that nail, and to make sure that we don't do only contract-based agreements with China, but it has to be interest and policy alignment for us to go.
So what essentially you say is that net, it is not only, contract-based, but it should align with the local policies and local interests, and have a 360-degree development, so that, as you said, each district develops and the dependency on others reduce. So that could be any country. So ultimately that's and that too, it reduced debt, or rather sustainable increase in debt, not the current debt situation that is prevalent at the moment.
Exactly. So we should help Africa to become more productive.
Perfect.
So we should help with development of skill sets, technology, development of manpower. We should focus more on that, so that Africa can also become more productive than dependent on them exporting just a raw material as a raw state of things without being transformed or being processed.
Right. Mr. Shanta, you had a point to say on this, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to actually supplement what Evans just said and respond a little bit to Jinjiang. We met several times when he was at the World Bank. The thing that I want to emphasize is that you said that China has a non-interference policy. But if you provide an investment project to a country and completely ignore all of the policy distortions in the country, so that that investment project is actually unproductive, that is interference. Just because you don't mention the policy framework doesn't mean that you're not interfering. So I think that's just a kind of interference that is similar to what other people like the World Bank might do, which is to talk to the country and see if they can change those policies to remove the distortions. And I would just emphasize one thing, Evans, these policy reforms are in the interests of the people. The problem, the reason why we have these distorted policies in many African countries is because of the corruption that you alluded to at the end. Those distortions, those subsidies are making a few people very rich. In Senegal, the subsidies to Senelec go for campaign financing, and it's a way of hiding black money through the public enterprise. So this is a huge burden on the African people, and we really have to do something in their interest. And I fully agree with you that the goal is to have productive projects, to have productive infrastructure. But that is what we are missing when we do infrastructure without policy reforms.
Thank you. I think productive projects, weed out the corruption, and have an all-round development. Mr. Jinjiang, your view now on both of them. You agree, disagree to what both of them have said, and how do you see this going forward?
Of course, I fully agree that policy framework is very important. In fact, in China, we always put policy framework first. Of course, you first have a policy, and then you start to implement the policy with the concrete actual project. Of course, policy comes first. There's no doubt about that. In fact, China's reform in the past 3 or 4 decades, China's reform program and open up strategy, they're first formulated by the policy was decided. It is the policy that has driven all this kind of development approach as a follow-up step. So policy comes, of course, that is important. But what I'm trying to say, the policy should be decided, should be formulated by the African countries themselves, not by the Chinese coming here. Okay, you should have this kind of no. Secondly, like to also say, because of the World Bank, IMF, they have already, every country, they have a development strategy, poverty alleviation, whatever you call it, country assistance strategy, they have all kinds of strategy. What the Chinese company need to do is they take a copy of that strategy produced, many volume produced by the World Bank plus IMF. That is enough. Well, maybe this to take it too far away, but the World Bank has done the policy work. Why did China need to do it again? They have to change the policy. Okay, stop listening to the World Bank. Okay, let me teach you how to do the first work. No, I don't think that's not the way. That is okay. The World Bank do the policies and we do the project. We built the road to connect Mombasa with Nairobi. Okay, the railway that will carry your goods to develop your trade. Okay, the World Bank has a very fabulous country strategy in Kenya. So okay, let's help you build a road to realize that policy. So that's what I call it. But of course, it doesn't mean that China has never discussed policy issue. If I heard from our events, I'm very glad from events that you said that you need the policy, you need discussion on policy, and the African countries need to improve the policy first. I fully agree with you, but maybe during the next round of discussion with the Chinese government or companies, you need to raise this issue to the your Chinese counterpart. Okay, how we want to do something in the policy field. Please, let's discuss this. What's your advice? What's your experience, for example? In fact, China sometimes they don't want to give others the policy advice, but they want to see the show how to do it. For example, in the early years of Chinese development, economic development, we call it, if you want to get out of poverty, get rid of poverty, okay, and then you need to build the road first. that's kind of policy approach. Okay, build the road first. Very important. I think that is where the idea, where the BRI came from. The Belt and the roads. Roads is very important in China. Okay, now they have a roads leading every village. So every village is linked. We call it a country village road and paved. Let me tell you the figure, the data provided by the I think by the United Nations. For example, because of the inadequacy of the infrastructure. Many people, what's the percentage? Say 38% of the population don't have access to electricity. Okay, only 10%, less than 10% of the road network in Africa is paved. So the road condition is very bad. That would add cost to the trade and development and the cost from let's say from 30 to 40% of the cost to the trade activities. That also reduce the productivity of the African countries by 40% because of the inadequacy of the infrastructure. If you improve that infrastructure, it could be a great help for the African development to increase its economic, increase the trade, to increase the productivity. Okay, but again, let's come back and say this is for the policy, the world project. We need to take it a balanced way. But my advice here, if you call it advice, is you raise this issue with the Chinese government. Okay, to discuss this. Okay, I want to discuss the policy, the development strategy with you. Can you come up? Can you please give us some your experience or your advice if you want? Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you. But by the way, if you don't ask this question, you don't raise the issue, the Chinese will not come first to tell you what to do, to tell you what the policy you should take. That's my advice here. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's an important point that there should be a dialogue and ask, maybe the China or whoever, that what changes with respect to the local needs can be to the policy, so that based on the experience of the vast experience that China has, be it in infrastructure, roads, ports, or anything else, they can guide, so to say, the African nations, and maybe kind of tweak it for the local market or the local industry and trade. Yeah,
Yes.
I think I think very interesting discussions. I'll just see if there is any questions, because we are approaching the last few minutes that we have. I would request the participants to post their questions in the chat box. We have a very eminent panel. It's not very often that you have such a panel, so make good use of this opportunity. In the meanwhile, maybe Mr. Shanta, any closing remarks?
Yes, many, but
Sure,
I'll try to
realistic.
be realistic. Yeah. Again, I think the big disagreement here is this what I would consider an artificial distinction between policy and projects. Jinjiang, you talked about, well, you take the World Bank's country assistance strategy as given, and then you decide what projects to undertake. Well, the World Bank might say something in a strategy, doesn't mean those policy reforms actually take place. That's the problem, right? So you can't assume that everything that is said, and you know that because you've reviewed it at the board. You can't assume that everything that is stated in that country assistance strategy will actually happen, because, as Evans was saying, these are deeply political changes. That it's a very tricky political gamble that's going on there about those policy reforms. But I would say, and I'm going to use a strong word, I think it's somewhat irresponsible to say we will do an investment project assuming that the policy reforms have taken place. I think that's very dangerous, and I think we're seeing the results of that. That's why I said in Zambia. I mean, you talked about the Nairobi, Mombasa to Nairobi railroad. There's a lot of criticism about that in Kenya as we speak, because from a policy point of view, it might have been cheaper to use the roads rather than build a railroad. And you know that railroad is actually losing money. They don't have enough passengers on that railroad. And it's the same thing with the roads in Ethiopia. I mean, there's a huge project to build roads in Ethiopia. Basically, Ethiopia is covered with roads now, but there are no cars. I've driven on those roads. They're empty. That's because there are a whole series of other reforms that Ethiopia needs to take to promote foreign trade. They have to do telecommunications reform. They still have only one telecoms company. They have to do electricity. They have to do financial sector reform, right? Unless you do that, Ethiopia cannot be a vibrant exporting economy. So that it doesn't help to have all these roads when you have nothing to ship on them. So I think these are serious problems about African development that we are, collectively, we all are trying to help. Exactly using the phrase that Evan suggested, the productivity of the African economy. That's absolutely essential. I can't resist, but let me just mention one other thing about the Belt and Road and the environment that Jinjiang discussed earlier, because I just looked it up because I teach a course on climate change and development. And it's true that China has committed to not building any new coal plants as part of the BRI initiative, because that's actually making the problem worse in terms of climate change. But the statistics are that the BRI itself alone built 40,000 megawatts, that's 40 gigawatts of coal-fired power plants every year for about 15 years during the Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, they've stopped now, but just think those coal-fired power plants are there. This is a paper by Nick Stern from the London School of Economics.
By the way, before I could forget, the Belt and Road Initiative only started 10 years ago, not 15 years. You already mentioned about 15 years. Yeah. It is 10 years. Not from it started from 2012, 2013, and now 2023.
Well, but there are coal-fired power plants built by China in 2009.
50 years ago, there's no, yeah.
Well, you could, under whatever initiative.
Unfair. It is unfair. My personal opinion, it's not, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Chinese government or whatever institution. My personal opinion, I participated in the climate change negotiations, stop from COP2, COP3. I remember going to Argentina, Buenos Aires in late 1990s. Oh, that time. They debate, okay, I'm not going to repeat that, but I think it's not unfair for developing countries, particularly for African countries. Now say, okay, you cannot use coal-fired field power plant. But while you guys for the last 100 years use the coal-fired power plants, but when this comes to our time, when we develop, we need a little development, we need electricity. But you said, okay, no coal-fired. For personally, it's unfair. But anyway, but now China has helped African countries to build the renewable energy facilities like solar energy, wind, water, the hydropower, solar, wind, and so on. So we will develop the new renewable energy as a priority instead of a coal field. But again, even that, but my personal feeling is, it is really unfair for African countries. They need electricity. But I heard some news about in the European countries, they started to reconsider, to reopen the coal field power plant because of the other factors affecting their energy supply. So we need to take that the development. Of course, the environment concern is fair, but it's good. But we also need to think of the poor developing countries. Think of their development, their right to develop. That is also, we need to also take that into consideration. Thank you. Maybe yes.
Well, thank you. It's a good counter view.
Yeah.
Good counter view. Dr. Evans, your closing comments.
That makes the debate interesting. So you cannot just
that makes the conversation interesting.
But another personal view, maybe it's politically incorrect, but as a human being, as a personal view, I think the African countries, they need electricity. If they don't have other methodology, what do they do? Okay, so the solar, okay, renewable, other renewable, it need time to develop that kind of things. And even the advanced economies, there's the percentage of your renewable energy still, it's far less than the what they call the fossil energy. How can you ask African countries, okay, you have to do all the renewables, all the new electricity to be generated by the renewable resources? It's not fair, frankly speaking.
Can I just say one thing about the coal, just in response to that?
Yes.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The point that's generally made is that African countries need to develop and grow, and so we shouldn't they shouldn't have to pay the price for a global public good, which is the mitigation of climate change. But it turns out, and there's some new work that shows that coal in particular has both a global cost in terms of carbon emissions, but also a local cost in terms of health effects. The coal dust that people breathe has damaging health effects. The difference, though, is that the coal dust is breathed by people in your own country.
Sure.
So it's not a global public good, it's a local public good.
Yeah.
And then they've done the analysis to show that the economic cost of the coal dust is bigger than the economic cost of the carbon emissions. So you could forget about climate change.
Sure.
Just stop talking about climate change. They shouldn't be building coal plants because it's killing their own people.
Yes.
It's not in the interest of African countries to build coal plants.
If we speak to an engineer, if we speak to a technician engineer, ask him what the technology of the coal-field power plant, you will get a very surprising answer. The clean coal, clean coal technology. We are getting a very surprised answer. Yeah, but anyway, this is not this.
Yeah, that is just.
It's not our subject.
I think there's a question in the.
Yeah, there's a question. Because we are nearing on the last 9 minutes. There's a good question by Istas. So the question goes basically, how can we bridge the gap between the road constructions and the job creation? And some people or group of people in Africa believe that job creation should be first, because job creation can create or generate income to develop roads. Good question, Dr. Evans. Would like to?
Yes. So yes, I think I'll go for this one. So when it comes to the road and the whole job creation, it's actually case by case scenario. So it's based on the region, it's based on the city, it's based on certain factors. If you pick the most productive cities and regions, what they need will be roads. And once the roads are there, the trade would automatically generate employment for the place. So for places that are not totally well, I would say, developed, if you go in with the roads, like Shanta gave the example of Ethiopia, then there'll be roads and there'll be nobody to even plow them. So we would have to do it case by case. And then, so where there is already development, roads are very essential. It has to be done. That would reduce the cost, and then the development of the trade will create the employment. Where there's less development, we should focus on industrializing the area, and along the line, bring the roads secondary, get them, and then they'll be able to get the results that we need.
I think, yes, this is a good answer. The second question from Joy. So, I mean, the obvious understanding is African as a continent is not poor. It is self-sufficient. What is trying to emphasize is they need funds or aid only to be more stringent, or I would say more advanced. And obviously there is a point wherein there is the corruption, or there's a lot of money that goes waste. So Joy feels that countries who do not wish for Africa to be self-sufficient will not benefit from this. So I think, which is a fair point, because if the any country who is going to help or trying to put in investment or project, or for a matter of fact help in policy making, should first benefit the local market or the local ecosystem. Without that, the development won't be sustainable or profitable in the long run at all. Dr. Evans?
Yes, so actually, yes, I 100% agree. I think Africa now would have to move a bit into what I call innovative development financing. I'll give an example with what Israel and India did with the diaspora bonds. The ideas behind what Israel and India did was to raise money from those in the diaspora and to bring it back home. Now, with this one, it is like people who already have a passion for their country. They love their country. These innovative ways will be able to help Africa. And according to the last report by the World Bank, this instrument is untapped in Africa. There are quite a number of good financial models, innovative instruments that Africa could use to help us to become more productive, but we are still not tapping into these areas. So the main thing is that Africa should look beyond just aids and grants and begin to look at which innovative financing models can we use that can immediately bring us rewards that would help us to create a consistent cash flow. The problem in Africa is that there's always a budget deficit. a balance of payments, we are always importing more than we exported. So there will always be that deficit there until we move into productivity. And Africa has made the mistake with these three things. We have productivity, we don't go for it. We go for taxation, we go for austerity measures. Neither of the two is going to increase and change our situation. Productivity is the way to go. Industrialization, digitalization, technology advancement, research and development, that is where we should put our money, and that is where we should. So I'll go for more of social impact bonds, diaspora bonds, and these ones will be able to help, because there are lots of philanthropists who are around who want to invest in social impact bonds. It wouldn't be as expensive as some of these Euro bonds that we are going for, and so on and so forth. So Africa should look at some of these innovative finance, and I think we should be good to go.
Thank you. There's one more question, Jingyang, for you. It goes like this. Please state what happens when developing countries do not follow the terms and conditions relating to the loans from China. Will they be required to pay back the loans? This is the question by Easter.
Well, we are talking about the market economy. We have to play the rules, the market. Okay, we could play the game by the market rules. As the events earlier told you, you cannot just take a grant or aid, what is a free money, free aid or grant. That's not the way for development. You need to borrow or to issue your own bonds or whatever kind of innovative financing approach. That is very important. I think I was before asked by an African friend. The African friend asked a question. You see, who can tell me when a single country has developed because of the aid grant provided to that country? And the audience of the silence remained silent, because not a single case was provided from the audience. Say, okay, it's one country that's fully developed because of the aid that received only, or grant. So that is important, I think, for a good project. A good project is very important. A good project, I will never be worried. You will never be worried about the payment of a good project. It is now, in some cases, it's not lack of money. It's not lack of financial resources. It is a lack of good project. If you have a good project, good program, the banks will chase you. They will want to lend money to you, so they can also get the return, get the payback, but get the interest, whatever. So it is very important. That is why we have put so much emphasis on the implement a good project. Implement a project that can generate economic, financial, and social returns for long-term, not just for short-term quick wins, but also for long-term development. I think that is also the experience of the Chinese development from World Bank. But we did not borrow money from World Bank to fill our deficit, to finance the deficit. No, we borrow from the World Bank to finance a railway or highway that can help the country to increase its economic productivity, to increase the trade, to increase all the economic activities. Because if you want to attract foreign direct investment, but you don't build roads, you don't build electricity, power plant, electricity, you don't provide water, you don't provide other facilities, telecommunications, the telephone lines, who would like to invest in your hometown? So if you want to attract foreign investors, you need to build the road. Okay, people say, okay, what is the use to build an empty road and no people to travel on? But take a long-term perspective view. If once you have a road, you have other things, the people will come to invest in your hometown. Okay, and again, this is the chicken and egg question, but I'm personally, I strongly believe we need to build road first. Although that road may seem empty the first few years, but later on, you will see the great benefit of that road we brought. Let's take a look. We can see the railroads. from Addis Ababa to Djibouti to the seaport. Let's see what would happen in the years later. Let's see the railway from Nairobi to Mombasa, the port city. Let's see all the transport, the benefits that would there. So we will not come to the conclusion right now. We don't have to rush to the conclusion right now. But let's see the development after a few years. Let's take a little bit longer term view for that. So again, I think it's very important to develop infrastructure first, and in order to create economic opportunities. Thank you. I'll stop here. So another question: do you ask when to pay back? If you borrow money, you don't want to pay back. That means the money you borrowed is useless. It's useless. Well, it generates nothing for you. Okay, you just waste it. If you borrow the money and you put it in the very productive use, and you pay it back, and even after you pay back the loans, you still have the project there. You have a power plant, you have a railway, you have a highway, you have things, facilities there. Continue to produce economic benefits for you, and for longer term. So do borrow money to do a good project, a productive project. Thank you. I just stop here. But of course, you have to pay back, because then others will continue to lend to you. If you borrow one single loan and you will never pay back, then who would follow to continue to borrow to lend money to you? Okay, the World Bank, for example, the World Bank, no country has defaulted on the World Bank. That's the policy. Okay, the World Bank, you have to pay back to the World Bank loans always. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think very interesting session. We would love to continue further, but for short of time, I guess we have already surpassed. Really, thank you, all three of you, for very interesting perspectives, sometimes contradictory, sometimes, complimentary. It was a very interesting session. Paul?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Boris. Thank you to our panelists, Shanta, Jinkan, and of course, Evans, for joining us for this session. It's been very interesting, the debates, the insights. Speaking from real life experience, I think it's been very insightful. So much appreciate. This session has been recorded, and of course, we're going to make it available on our YouTube channel. We'll share with our speakers and our participants as well in the coming days. We are not done yet for the day. We have our final session for day one of the GEIF, which is happening in about less than 15 minutes time. So for our participants that have joined us, you'll be receiving another email from the ICC with a link to join that session, which is probably very interesting as well. So we hope that all of you will make time to join us. So once again, thank you, and hope to see you in the next session. Goodbye.
Thank you. See you in the next session.
Thank you very much. Very good session.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. It's nice to see you all.